Welcome to the Perspective Podcast. Josue here. As you guys probably already know, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, I attended the Oral Roberts University. I preach at times, but we don't really talk about that. To my left, we have Mr. Chase Brown. He was born in Texas, North Texas to be exact. He attended the University of North Texas. He's an aspiring philanthropic creative, and it is February 10th. February 8th, 9th, 8th. It is February 8th, and we are in California, which means he's by the beach. And for those of you guys that have been following us for any amount of time, we know how much he loves very long walks on the beach. So today we'll be able to get into that a little bit more. So Chase Brown, how you doing?
I'm doing really good, man. We'll see if we could get a long walk in on the beach, or a long run in on the beach. I need a long run. I need a run.
Yes.
We can see that before we leave here in a few days. But it's good, man. I'm happy to be back in LA. Happy to be with friends. Man. Excited to see this conversation. How are you, bro?
I'm good. I'm always doing good. I think the sun is shining. I haven't seen any birds in LA yet, so hopefully at some point we see some birds flying around. I think it'll be a good time. But as you guys already know, if there's a video going on, that means we have some special guests. Today we really had to get some of LA's finest to join us on this conversation. It's going to be a great conversation, so we were excited to introduce you guys to some very great people, and then we'll kind of get into why we're all here. We do have a returning guest with us over there on the right. You guys should be very familiar with him. Mr. Danny, he's back. This was the second time?
Yeah.
Second time, right? Yeah, he's back with us second time. Lonnie isn't here, so it's just him by himself this time. You guys already know he's famous. What does he do? Man, I heard he led a crusade of 1 million once. It's kind of crazy. He's 4-time. I heard it somewhere on Facebook. I don't know. Yeah, it's a rumor. Let's just say it's a rumor. I don't know. Maybe it's a rumor. He's LA's 4-time, let's say, Mr. What do we want to give him?
Mr. Piano Man of the Year.
Mr. Piano Man of the Year. He's LA's 3-time most influential super Christian of the month. We'll give him that award as well. He's a 2-time LA, Mr. Tesla. That's what they call him.
You seem to be say that in the streets.
They call him that in the streets. And the one time, he's a child of God. He loves Jesus. We love having him on. And today, we also have Stephanie here with us. I don't know your last name. Mensa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll have to get into that background here in a second. We have Stephanie with us. Stephanie, Danny, you want to help us out with the introduction?
Yes, totally. Stephanie, I consider her like the official historian of circuit riders, Black voices, and revival history.
She was giving a lot.
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, she just remembers details so well, and she is a revival woman herself. She disciples so many young women in the faith. She has been here since the very beginning in circuit riders and Black Voices history. Black Voices is still young; it's like 2 years old. Just really has been such a key person in this movement. So Stephanie is incredible. We are blessed to have her.
We're blessed to have Stephanie. Yes. Let's give a round of applause for Danny and Stephanie who joined us today. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Good. Excited to be here.
No, more than that. What's been, before we get into Black Voices movement in specific, what's been going on in life? What's the Lord been walking y'all through? What comes to mind? What do y'all want to share?
You go first.
Okay.
Ladies first.
Oh my God. Wow. I think this is like slightly of a different season. Like I'm used to at this time of year being on tour. So the ministry that we're a part of with YWAM, Black Voices is under, it's called Circuit Riders. And we have about 200 staff and we run training schools. And then every spring we send teams all over America and Europe to preach the gospel, primarily on college campuses. And we have 3 teams with Black Voices specifically going to 36 HBCUs and also partnering with predominantly Black churches and other communities. It's amazing the fruit that's already coming forth. Like the stories in the group text of like people getting saved like wild. It's beautiful what God's doing. But I've normally been a tour leader. So I'm used to, at this time of year, being on the road. And around last year, really felt the Lord say, hey, there's a pivot coming. Go on tour, finish well, it's your last one. And so just had kind of like a sweet, like, kind of ending season with tour.
Yeah.
And knew that the Lord was pulling me into more focusing on training, like as Danny mentioned, discipling students and things like that. And it's beautiful, but it's different. I don't know if like you're used to, like if you're an athlete and you're used to like working one side, that's like your good side.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden
that's Josue. Yeah.
You have a shirt that says Alpha Elite.
And then all of a sudden your coach is like, okay, you're gonna like actually do this side. And you're like, that's not my dominant side. I'm not used to that. And so it takes a little bit of time for it to not feel foreign. And so that's very much like what this season is for me. I'm just kind of like getting my bearings a bit. And then I've been sick for a couple years and just like learning to lean on Jesus a lot and that he's really, really kind and that he's not looking for me to perform for him to prove that I'm like revivalist woman of glory, but he just wants me to be his friend. And so I'm learning a lot in this season, like what does simple friendship with Jesus look like when everything, like the whole landscape looks completely different, when your health isn't optimal, like what does it look like to just be a friend of God? And so it's been a stretch for sure, but it's been really good.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Something quick off of that is I just got done reading a book on prayer and fasting from Derek Prince.
Oh, yes.
And
That book is fire.
like a very small excerpt from it, which touches on what you talked about, is like sometimes we think that we can go into fasting to be able to pull answers out from the Lord and sort of perform for him, for his pleasure, but like that's not what the Father's heart is.
Yeah.
He just wants us to be a son and a daughter and a friend and all of that. So that's beautiful that you've been learning that.
He's
Danny.
good.
Yes, I mean, I feel like my season right now is very complex due to a lot of different things I'm involved with being the Send, everything that's going down with Circuit Riders, Black Voices, and then just personal life. So my energy level is not at maximum, but it's just at the same time, there's such a joy in seeing all the fruit that I get to see, that we get to see. We're hearing testimonies from tours. And we have so many of our staff, like over 100 of our staff, plus students on the road right now in Europe and here in America. And it's just story after story about what God's doing on these campuses in these cities. And I'm like, I'm a part of this.
Yes.
And then I'm just here in, California, just leading a team of media creatives, and they are just, it's like I'm tired, but I'm so fulfilled. So it's a great trade-off, I would say.
Dang.
But yeah, God's been so good. I feel his nearness even in the midst of my own limitations, and it feels so great to lean on him. And I have a love-hate relationship with weakness because I don't like feeling weak, but I like where weakness leads me. So.
Ooh, it's true.
I got to show a writing to you after this. I got you. Dang, that hit. Well, we know y'all only have a little bit of time, and so we want to honor y'all on that because y'all have way too much on your plate. Servants of the Lord here.
You can always get another plate.
Oh my God.
Just slide one.
So, from a starting standpoint, Black Voices movement, you shared a little bit about it being a brand, a ministry under Circuit Riders. From there, what is the story of how the Black Voices movement was birthed?
Yeah.
I'm going to have the historian introduce this one.
Oh my goodness. How do I condense it? Because it's like there's so many things that led up to it.
Yes.
So I'll give like a quick preamble on like kind of things that led into it. We had in 2016 Brad LaChapelle and another man named John Paul Howard that pioneered the HBCU tour of CR.
Yes.
So we do something called Carry the Love, and we've been doing that for years. And it's an evangelistic outreach to university campuses. And within that, John and Brad were talking about how there needed to be a specific, like a targeted outreach to HBCUs. That there is a specific call and a destiny on students on those campuses. And that you can't just kind of like it's not just gonna happen. Like reaching them, like you have to intentionally pursue them.
Yeah.
Just like if you feel like a specific people group highlighted in the Lord, like you intentionally pursue that people group. And that the HBCUs would be a catalyst for awakening and revival in the Black community unto a diverse missions movement. And so they started, I think the first tour went in 2016, and then there were multiple teams that went after that. And so that was kind of the beginnings. And then in 2020,
Yes.
2020.
That year.
20, yes. That year. I'd say 2020 was a watershed year for the whole body of Christ, not because there was a stirring up of the pot, but because things became uncovered.
Yes.
And it was like the Lord, Brian Brent, actually, the leader of CR, he said this. It was like the Lord is holding us to the fire on these issues. He's not going to let us out. And because he wants to deal with it, because it matters to him. And so we saw a lot of just things that haven't been really talked about enough start to be uncovered in really painful ways in the nation, with the death of Ahmaud Arbery and then Breonna Taylor and then George Floyd, and just the debate of debates about even language, and is this political, is this gospel, like how do you talk about these things, you know what I mean? And I think what was so beautiful about that season was the bold, gracious, and yet unapologetic way in which the leadership of CR addressed everything that was happening, both internally and then the language that we used to communicate to those that look to us for gospel leadership, I guess. And I had so many friends that were part of other missions agencies that were saying, like, there were minorities in other missions agencies, saying it's so healing to see the way that CR leadership, that's predominantly white, is handling these conversations. It feels like I have permission to be in pain, and that my pain isn't a hindrance to the unity of the faith or the furtherance of the gospel. Like, I can actually bring my pain to the table and deal with it, and also ask, like, God, what do you have to say about this? And so I think circuit riders started talking about it. Internally, we had a lot of really wild conversations as a movement. And then we got to be a part of some of the response, even on the heels of what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd. Danny and a team of 4, I think, went a couple days after. Like, they went that weekend. So it happened on a Monday. They went that weekend, and then they came back, and then the whole team of us went that following week, and just watched as the Lord moved, as we chose to stand proximate to the pain of the people, but also came with, man, there is a solution, and it's the cross.
Yes.
And so it was beautiful how God moves, and I don't really have time to get into all of that, but that was kind of the beginning stages. And then fast forward to Black History Month 2021, and basically every Monday night, we do Monday night services here. And at the time, because of COVID, we weren't able to gather in person. So we were doing it on Zoom, and we were live streaming it, or not on Zoom, we were doing it on a YouTube live stream. Yeah. And each one of those weeks, the core leadership of CR had planned to talk about specific challenges, and even in the conversation, and to address it from a biblical perspective. So it starts with Brian Brent, leader of CR, who passed away last year. It started with him talking about, like, what does it look like to walk a mile in the shoes of another? Like, the call to compassion and the call to radical courage in that place of compassion, and almost humanizing the conversation, every way in which it become really political, and like really political conversations can dehumanize the other.
Yes.
And Brian was like, we're not gonna go there, because that's not what the gospel does. We're gonna address the humanity and the real pain and the real challenges of people that might not look like you, and lives that you don't live. Let's talk about that, and let's talk about Jesus's grief over injustice, because it's real. And then the following week, Nick Brent literally preached on white supremacy. And he's like, to say white supremacy doesn't exist is a deception, because the human heart, apart from Jesus, is full of pride.
Yeah.
And so if you're exalting self, and you're exalting even the benefits of whatever your dominance is, that is supremacy. And it's like, for this specific conversation that we're having, let's talk about white supremacy. It's real, it's an Antichrist spirit, it's a sin, and it grieves the heart of God. And I think just the fact that he wasn't shying away from even using those terms, but then he brought it into a gospel conversation, it started to shift even so much of what was happening in our community. We had Group Me at the time, and Group Me is blowing up with people weeping, getting set free, feeling permission. I remember when someone asked, like, how many nationalities are in this community? And people start sharing, like, my family comes from here, my family comes from here. And one guy's like, man, my family's Korean, and I never really felt like I could use my real Korean name in this community because I felt like I'd be ridiculed, but this is my Korean name, and I'm gonna let you know that this is who I really am. And there was like a corporate freedom that started to break out as we addressed like what was happening in our nation at the time. It was so beautiful. And so there was more that happened, but Brian sat on a Zoom, Brian and his wife, Christy, they had a Zoom with all of the Black staff at the time. And we just-
And some students.
And some of the students. And he was like, I just wanna hear, how are you? How has this been? Like, be honest, be candid. And just getting the pulse of how everyone's been feeling, questions that people had, just the real like wrestle that you feel. And it was so beautiful because Brian just kind of said, you know, I feel like we need to have a gathering.
Yeah.
and so long story short, we just said, okay, like let's gather young Black leaders from across the nation. We didn't really know a ton. And a few of us were on tour at the time. And so we just started inviting students. And then what was so beautiful to me was in Group Me, people were saying, okay, these students are coming from HBCUs. It's the middle of a semester. They can't just fly to California. How can we fund them to come?
Yeah.
And so our community is like taking an offering they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're not just saying like, God, heal the racial divide in America. They're like, how can I actively come alongside an undergird and see how this can happen? And so about 50 young leaders flew to California. And that was in April of 2021. And we were outside under a tent, outside of a church, literally on like the cement parking lot. But the glory of God fell on that tent.
Yeah.
And Danny shared, and Eola came from Upper Room, and she shared, like there was almost like spontaneous, like the passing of the mic from Brian and other leaders in CR. And God just started to drop on the reality of whenever there's an oppressed people biblically, the Lord has like an invitation and a mandate of deliverance.
Yes.
And he's also inviting them to walk in radical forgiveness unto authority. And he's inviting them to sing. That there is a worship call from that place as well. And the motif of Moses kept coming up. And so it was so powerful, and we were so marked in that tent. And every single one of us was like, man, like we have friends that we wish could be in this tent right now. And Yasmin just said, what if we did another gathering and we invited, what if 300 came? And it was kind of like those moments where you don't know that it's like a Holy Spirit moment until God just lands on your words.
Yeah.
And people started getting hit with the power of God in the tent.
Yeah.
Yaz got laid out. Jonathan got laid out. It was like power of God moment. And we're like, okay, God's doing something. We need to gather. And freedom and permission starts hitting all of CR. Like it poured into the next day with our staff meeting Monday nights. And God really just started moving. It launched from there. And Brian really kind of, I want to say that he like gave the assist like hardcore, like because
he slam dunked.
Because he was just like, what if you guys made an album? And like, no, like none of us had ever thought of like, how do you even do a live album recording? Like none of us knew what to do.
And at this point, we still didn't have a name.
Literally, there was no name.
We were caught up into a storyline that we didn't originate.
Yeah.
It really felt like we were just, catching the wind of God.
Yes.
And it just didn't happen from a good idea.
Yeah.
It was a response from a people really broken.
Yeah.
From just partnering with God's heart in a place of intercession.
Yes.
And that's, I feel like, what unfolded, and something that is now turned to be so beautiful. And so dynamic by nature.
Yes.
And so needed.
Yeah.
Where it's, like Steph is saying, there's been such an emphasis on freedom, and then such an emphasis on solution.
Yes.
Not found in human effort or ideas, but really just solution from heaven, biblical solution. And it it's been unreal. And so that's like, so after that 50-person gathering, we then just, God was clearly on it, and it's like, we have to pray.
Yes.
And so we just took it into a season of prayer. And obviously there was unction during that moment where we're like, okay, there's something on this, and like, what if 300? What if like there's 300 like more people that want to get caught up in this reality, that not just, agree with the narrative that is, I guess, standard for the typical Black person in America, but to really get caught up into what God's saying about a whole race, a whole group of individuals that he finds beautiful.
Yes.
And give them solution and trade it for, whatever, any of the plights that, can be accustomed to, people that are African American and from Africa diaspora. So, yeah, and then the 300 gathering in August, and it has been a wild ride ever since.
Yes. It's been so fast. And Brian and Christy actually said that. They've prayed, and they're like, this is going to be the fastest,
Accelerated.
Most accelerated movement that has ever come out of Circuit Riders. And it's been, it's been so beautiful to see. And I think what I love about Black Voices is, obviously the whole point of Black Voices is to empower young Black leaders into their Christ-centered callings and purposes.
Yes.
But what's been so powerful to me is that it is giving permission to everybody.
Yes.
It's not just like Black people come in the room and they're like, wow, this is amazing. And like non-Black people are like, wow, like I wish I could be empowered too. Like what we've seen is that our whole community has taken on like a vibrancy and a fullness that I didn't even know how to believe for that. Does that make sense? Like I didn't know that it was like, oh, that was possible. Like that was, it's almost like going from, the movies that are kind of like grayscale and then it becomes Technicolor and you're like, whoa.
Great.
Like there's so much life here. And even Lindy Kofer, one of the worship leaders with Circuit Riders, she said that she has never felt more freedom and permission to be herself than because of what has been catalyzed in her own heart. Being around Black voices and the worship and everything that's come forth from it. So it's really cool to see how biblically, like you see that the Lord lands on one person or one people to break through for a fuller expression, or to break through for everybody walking in freedom. And I think in Black Voices kind of being the vanguard, if you will, there's like a breakthrough that we're seeing that everyone is walking in as Circuit Riders, and it's so exciting.
Yeah, I think that's probably the. I feel like we've asked a lot of people like about different groups, organizations, and they kind of give like a small synopsis of it. So that was great.
I told you she's a historian.
Yeah, you was. I'm listening. I'm sitting back here like, wow. I'm just staring at you talk. You're really great at communicating.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
It shows the importance of the memories too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like it was just in your head and you just kind of shared everything. So that was
She's
amazing. But like I remember, I actually had a friend who sent me the video, one of the videos you guys did. I can't remember where it was, and I was watching it. I remember the thing that I kind of took away from that was like, man, these people are so happy, like that, because I didn't know Danny at the time. I just remember walking away like, man, they're happy. And then so I somehow ended up on the page, just kind of to read about, the who we are page and what we do and different things like that. So it's like a full circle for me sitting here with you guys and kind of just hearing some of the stories of how everything started. And even in light of that, I think especially in 2020, there was a lot of conversations and everything else being had and what the Lord was able to birth from that place. I guess my question, in light of everything that you guys are sharing, what were maybe some of the challenges that you're presently facing in light of that, if there are any challenges, or some things that you're like, man, we feel like there's a little bit of resistance here, because someone hears Black voices and they're like, oh, why can it be white voices, for example,
Yeah.
or whatever?
We've
right?
had that question.
Yeah, exactly. Because I read somewhere where someone was like, can white people attend too? That's kind of where my thought came from, right? So have you guys seen anything like that where you're like, maybe this is something we should address or, yeah.
It is kind of interesting because we are completely aware of the tension that, just having a ministry called Black Voices can, lead to.
Yeah.
Because of especially how politicized just being Black was. Just by being Black in 2020, those two things together, it has become so political. So it's very hard for people to see it as just something that is not political. So we're very aware, but we've literally had comments, we've had videos made, speaking against what we're doing, about the exclusivity of it.
Yeah.
And it's so wild, but we are experiencing so much breakthrough.
Yeah.
So much revival of the heart.
Yep.
We literally do not have time to address it. we have our guys are on the road right now. Like hundreds of people are coming into the kingdom. There are so many young Black leaders getting activated, getting set free.
Yes.
They are getting baptized.
Yeah.
They are getting their lives completely transformed. And so we literally do not have the time to actually address a lot of the comments that already have a made up agenda.
Yeah.
So there's that. But just to give even clarity, since we're on a podcast here, it's not exclusive for the sake of exclusivity.
Specific.
It is it's exclusive for the sake of inclusive, being inclusive. That's the goal, is like we have to understand that God's returning for a body of Christ as multi-ethnical, multinational, multilingual. And we are seeing a focus on a group of people that need to get their voice strengthened. They need to get activated so that we can join that end time army, for lack of better words, so that we can really say we have a strength to contribute.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful because that's what we're saying is there's no essence of any type of superiority, any type of essence of like look what we can do on our own. It is always like we are finding our strength, and now we can add to what God's doing in the earth. What he's saying, what he's, people are grabbing hold of what the Lord is saying and saying, God, like, I didn't know I had a spot at the table.
Yes.
I didn't know that I had access to join in the Great Commission. And I feel like, we're in a missions organization, and one of the things I say is like, if we're not about like seeing every like race and people group activated, we are settling for a good commission instead of a great commission. Because sometimes in America we have the concept that it is not missions unless we go. But what if missionaries came from Africa to America? What if people came from China to Africa? And so I guess we can't just settle for that missions, the Great Commissions of us going, but it's, for every nation, from every nation.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what we're saying. And, a good, I guess, comparison would be like, a women's gathering.
Yeah.
Right? So obviously there's an importance for women to gather together because there is a shared experience. And so there is less hurdles to jump over. There's less things to kind of work through when everyone has a shared experience. And so it allows for acceleration. It allows for shoulders to be dropped.
Yep.
It allows for a potency of freedom that otherwise would have to be kind of tamed because people in the room that are not with that shared experience might feel offended, or as someone is saying something in a raw format that is necessary for freedom. And so that's kind of like the goal behind it. But this is not like just a good idea. Like I said, this is what we heard in prayer. And so
That's good,
we're sticking with the word of the Lord, and we're not budging from it, because we have to. This is not something that was made up by us. We might have created a brand and made the logo, but it's really come from the heartbeat of God. So we're navigating accordingly. So
yeah, that's right.
And it's something that, going off of that, but touching on what you had talked about earlier about the breakthrough and freedom that y'all are experiencing. I saw this quote, trust breeds trust, but I think it's also something that freedom breeds freedom. That if you see someone who is free in who the Father made them to be, that inherently will create a desire in you to want to be free like that.
Yeah.
And you see someone who's willing to embrace the journey or pay the cost for that freedom.
Yeah.
And so then you're even encouraged to pay the cost or embrace the journey for that freedom. And so that's so beautiful.
It's true.
From a practical standpoint, you talked about the tours. You talked about the couple nights of gatherings that y'all had here. What else is, and you talked about the album as well. From a practical level, what's on the 2023 vision board? If there's a vision board for Black Voices movement, I don't know if that's a Christian thing. I have no idea. But what is the vision that God's given y'all for 2023, either from a heart level or a practical level?
I'll go practical, you go heart?
Yep.
Okay. So practically, we kind of have like a, at a larger scale for circuit riders, we have like a circuit rider calendar. And so,
Very busy.
Yes.
I mean, but we're in the middle of our tours right now.
Yeah.
And so we have a team, we have 3 Black Voices teams that are going to various HBCUs, which is historically black colleges and universities. And so we are hitting 2/3 of them. Maybe
We're at 36.
We're at 36.
And there's 104.
Yeah, so
congregation.
close to a third.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're hitting about a third of the schools, and then we're also going to we're going to certain cities that are predominantly Black as well. And so from this tour, we're just really focused on kind of quick evangelism training, activation, freedom, salvation. That's what we're focused on for these tours right now. The tours end in March. We'll be doing a citywide gathering in Newark, New Jersey. I think in May. April. And then we will be then from that point, we'll be doing schools. So we'll be training. We'll be doing our schools in Huntington Beach, California. And we'll have a movement track that's specifically for Black Voices, where we'll teach on evangelism, we'll teach on being a messenger, teach on an activated voice. And then from that, we have our long-term school called Circuit Rider Experience, where we'll also have a focus for Black Voices. And then there might be some future gatherings in the mix.
And outreaches.
Yeah, that's kind of the calendar for the year, and the goal is just to continue just to see young Black leaders empowered in their Christ-centered calling and purpose.
Yeah. I think heart level, it's twofold. One is that we just want to see as many young Black messengers as possible in a room. Like, we want to get as many in a room and to hear not only do they have a voice, but that their voice is needed in the Great Commission, that they have a part in the Great Commission, and that the Lord wants to use them. Whether they go to like Tibet or not is irrelevant. Like, they could be in like Chicago and being an effective minister of the gospel, because we're all called to the Great Commission. Like, Jesus didn't say, if you're in vocational missions, you're called to preach the gospel. He said, go, all of you, go everywhere. Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, like, you're going to be my witnesses unto his return. And so if we want people to know about Jesus, if we want cultures to be transformed, if we want nations to be discipled, which is our mandate, then that requires everybody walking in full confidence in Jesus and in the role that they are to play in it, whether it's you're a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, but that you would know that you have a voice and that your voice is powerful and that it's vital. And
share this statistic.
Oh yeah. So, and then as far as like vocational missions are concerned, less than 1% of missionaries sent from America are Black, which is crazy. That's actually insane. Yeah. And I think the reason why that is devastating is because it portrays a kingdom optic to the nations that isn't kingdom. Like the kingdom looks like Revelation 7:9.
Yeah.
Every tribe, every tongue, every ethnic group, and yet it portrays a gospel that's predominantly Western and white. Does that make sense? And there's nothing wrong with Western culture. We love Western civilization.
Well, there's some things wrong with it.
Well, but like, you know what I mean? Like Western civilization is a gift.
We're gonna be honest here.
And there's nothing wrong with white people. But like there is like the gospel was from an entirely Eastern culture, and it was for everybody. Like there was no like, oh, you don't fit. You know what I mean? And so I feel like when you have every voice activated, it shows the nations who God really is like, what he actually looks like. It says in Ephesians that, like, Paul says, I bow my knee before the Father, from whom every family on heaven and earth derives its name. Every family, right? Mm-hmm. So there's something beautiful about every family being seen for us to fully see who God really looks like. And so for us, as it pertains specifically to Black voices, we believe fundamentally that we will not complete the Great Commission without Black people being sent as missionaries. And that's part of like the jealousy of God over his commission being done his way. Yeah. And then with that also, we feel like there is a breakthrough for our own people, our own communities, our own churches, like as Black people, that we will not fully step into if we do not lay hold of the mandate of Jesus. Yeah. Like there's a breakthrough that we might want to see in Baltimore that we fundamentally cannot and will not see if Black churches aren't sending missionaries. Yeah. And so I think those are two main heart pieces behind it. But as far as like why we do gatherings, like we just want to get Black people in the room and be like, hey, like this is what God's doing. Like you have a role, you have a voice, you have permission in the Great Commission. Would you lay hold? And there's something so beautiful about young Black people getting in a room together. It's so fun, firstly, but also a lot of the barriers that you would have to jump through aren't there because we all fundamentally are kind of flowing in a similar way. Yeah. And we've seen so many students not just get delivered, but we've seen students literally crying because they're like, you look like me, and I've never seen leadership like that calling me into my purpose.
Yeah. That's a true story, like, because it's so weird to say this, but we're a part of the 1%.
Yeah.
And it's crazy on how just taking the pressure of pioneering and not choosing to quit because of the lack of representation, but continue saying, God, I say yes, even though like it doesn't look like this is what I should be doing based on what I see. I know you've been in missions for 9 years, 10 years? 11 years. I've been in missions for about 7 to 8 years. And the amount of, young Black men that's come up to me saying, I didn't know that there was Black missionaries like this. I didn't know that I could be doing what you're doing. And it's powerful. And now we went from having a less diverse community here in Circuit Riders to now having around 50 Black missionaries just in Circuit Riders alone. When we were there's 3 of us at the beginning of Circuit Riders. So, yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, that's amazing. Being able to see the growth that has come, as a result of the obedience, and you guys also just praying into what the Lord was doing at the time, not shying away from that, And so, I guess a question that I was kind of thinking about as you guys were sharing, what does that look like whenever you do go to the universities and you do get the get the students in the room and they're just staring at you, right? What are those conversations like? What are those moments like? Like, what does that look like to be at a HBCU? We know the culture has already set there, and some of the believers that are there. Like, how do you initiate those conversations? What are you talking about? Like, if you could kind of share without giving too many secrets away. If it's,
I think a simple response to that is that really having a confidence that the gospel is the solution, and that it affects every culture. It speaks to every culture. It's 100% for everybody.
Yeah.
And it can, if you're the more broken, the more potent.
Oh.
And I feel like it's what we lead with, and it kills all argument, because you can't argue love. You can't argue the cross, and that's what it's our strongest weapon. Always will be, and I feel like each of our teams are equipped to be gospel carriers.
Yes.
And it just dismantles so much.
Yeah.
It really does. Yeah. So that's a simple response.
When we do tours, so we spend the fall connecting with students, either on pre-tour, which is like when you actually go to the campuses that you're potentially going to be doing tour and meeting with students, kind of hearing their heart, or just on the phone. Whether we connected, I remember one fall we didn't have any student contacts at certain schools, and so we just started contacting students cold on Instagram, which was amazing. It was actually super fruitful.
You slid into the DMs.
Because it was Black people who love Jesus, and they're like, bet, let's do this. And so through the fall is that you're planning tour. Yeah. So you're on the phone, you're planning your tour out, you're working with your co-leaders, you're messaging. And as Danny said, like, we lead with the gospel, because that is the power of salvation, is the gospel, you know? Mm-hmm. And we preach Christ and Him crucified unapologetically. And we also have activation messages. Yes. So there are usually two that you'll hear in a night at a tour stop. There's a gospel presentation and an altar call given for that. Like, we don't assume that even if we're coming into a Christian university or if we're coming into a campus fellowship, that every person there actually has surrendered their life to Jesus. Yes. So many of us know church, but we don't actually know Jesus. Yeah. And so we're like, we don't want you to just have the tradition of like, my grandma prays and I grew up in church. It's like, is Jesus in you? Is He your best friend? Have you surrendered your life to the leadership and the lordship of Jesus Christ? And so we preach the gospel. We give a response time, and then there's always an activation around whatever is kind of like a key, I guess, topic that we've prayed through to be emphasized in that specific season. So last year, one of the main messages we felt was surrender unto solution, which is like, what does that look like for you in your life to live a life wholly yielded unto the Lord, that God can actually trust you and land on you to be a carrier of His solution that brings transformation, that brings healing, that brings breakthrough wherever you go. And that message kind of came out of the story of Moses. Like, he saw that there was injustice. He was like, oh my gosh, like, these people, like, I was raised in the palace, but I'm really a Hebrew, and my people are being oppressed, and this is wrong. So he kills the Egyptian, thinking that's the solution, right? But that was his solution. That wasn't God's way. And there was a process of him surrendering and honestly being broken into being a vessel. Into being a vessel that God could fill and infuse, which was clearly God's original design and purpose anyway. Like, Moses was born to be the deliverer, but he had to be like conformed into God's method of deliverance. So there's surrender unto that place of solution. So that was one of the activation messages that we preached on tour last year. And so,
our other one is the King is calling.
Yes.
And it's so amazing what happens when you know that King Jesus is actually calling.
Yes.
And that you get to respond to that. And I feel like a lot of times there's so many man agendas that we have to kind of, decipher and, kind of navigate, through. But it's like when the King is calling, there's like, oh my goodness. It's not just, it's like, is you get to respond.
Yes.
And so that's what is just so, I feel like, so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we usually have like a day 2 at every campus stop. And so that will include evangelism training. And then actually going out and taking students to preach the gospel. And that's so fun because so many students have never preached the gospel before. Yeah. And those moments are so catalytic because they're getting, like, it's practical. It's not just I'm sitting here and you're telling me I'm a messenger. It's not I'm actually activating in what you say is true about my life. I'm jumping past all fear, inadequacy, like all of those things, and I'm opening my mouth to share about this Jesus that I say that I love. And these students always get lit up, and the fruit is insane. Yes. Like, looking at some students a year, 2 years down the line, there's this one student, his name's Maurice, he's at the AUC, so that's Morehouse, Belmont, Clark, Atlanta, but he goes to Morehouse. And he started, one of his, I guess, places of feeling so activated was to start a Bible study on his campus. There's now 150 students that go to that Bible study. Excuse me, what? That's insane. You know?
So some good fruit there.
There's such good fruit. It's so fun. So we do evangelism training, and then sometimes, depending on the campus, we'll do a men's gathering. So the men will all gather, and then all the women will gather together. Because again, as Danny said, like, there's something about gathering together within the shared experience. So there are things that, like, all the dudes together, like, that activates men in a way when no women are... The bros, the dudes. I'm from SoCal, okay? It activates guys in a way that they just physically can't if there's another girl in the room, you know? There's conversations you guys can have. Same with us. Like, there's a way that women can get really vulnerable at the heart level that when another man's in the room, even if he's, like, meaning well and, like, wanting a champion, like, sometimes there's like a barrier in some people's hearts, especially if there's been instances of injustice or trauma where you're like, I don't want to talk with you in the room right now, you know? And so we have a men's moment, a women's moment, and the women's moment's called Brave Love. And it's just always so beautiful to see what God does in those things as well.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I don't know if Danny would shoot a shotgun out in the middle of Texas if a woman was there, but...
That's a true story. I went skeet shooting in Texas. The boys.
It was a good time. You should have been there. You should have been there. It's okay. Really? It's okay. That'll be okay. Well, you'll be with us here in a couple months down in Costa Rica. So, but we know y'all got to go. So just a couple more minutes because we want to honor y'all as individuals and give y'all the opportunity to just kind of share what has been the thing that's impacted you personally the most about Black Voices, whether it is a event or whether it is something that the Lord spoke to you during it.
You go first.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, our first gathering, Brian Brent, our leader that passed away from a little bit over a year ago, he asked me to kind of host with Yasmin Pierce, which is, I would say, is the leader.
She is. She's my president.
She is the president, yes. But I was speaking, I was opening up the gathering, and we're all in a tent in a parking lot outside, and I just remember seeing 50 Black young leaders in front of me, and I started crying uncontrollably because I didn't know how rare that sight was. To see these people that came from all over the nation that just want Jesus highest.
Yeah.
So that has deeply impacted me and how it's transformed me personally. I've recognized a strength to my voice, a strength to my leadership that was really timid, that was really shrunk, that was really withdrawn prior to Black Voices being an actual thing. And then when I see so many lives transformed, it's just the biggest validation from heaven that this is so needed. And then hearing my non-Black brothers and sisters, my Asian brothers and sisters, my Hispanic brothers and sisters feeling so activated by seeing a minority expression come to full strength. And this is one thing that has really been kind of a staple piece for me during 2020, the Lord kind of showed me how we've settled for a false unity.
Say that again.
And we thought unity was everyone conforming to the same expression.
Jesus.
And it's just not at all.
Yes.
But true unity, a biblical unity, is every person being fully empowered in their original design and joining together in full strength. And so I couldn't say that I'm for you, Chase, if I'm not for you being fully empowered. I couldn't say I'm for you, Josue, if I wasn't for you being fully empowered.
Yeah.
And that is what makes this so beautiful to me, is like I'm a part of a ministry, an organization, a storyline that's wanting to see people that are different than me and people that are like me fully strengthened, so that we can see a unified bride
That's
and an
good.
effective bride. Yeah,
Man,
Thanks for sharing, bro.
definitely.
that's good. I think, man, Black Voices has been a dream come true. And I think one of the main things that's blessed my heart the most has been seeing the church through this, I guess, be on more of the forefront of God's heart for redemption and reconciliation for a people group, as opposed to leaving it to
Yes.
politicians.
Yeah.
And I think so much about Dr. King and his I Have a Dream speech that everyone likes to quote. But I think about the reality of what he went through as a minister of the gospel. That's who he was. He was a pastor. And everything about the Montgomery bus boycotts, the SCLC, everything that they did was birthed out of the place of prayer and the church and the family of God. And when I look at what they did, I was it was really a revivalist movement. They were really carrying a breakthrough and trying to see a church that was in compromise come into repentance and freedom, that they could actually walk together as brothers. You read his letters from a Birmingham jail. He's I'm appealing to you, because you're my brothers in the faith, let's deal with this, you know? And so I look at that and I'm that wasn't a political move. Yes, he was dealing with laws that were unjust, but he was trying to deal with the hearts and minds of a people that were making unjust laws. Does that make sense? And so I think for me, I look at the legacy of that we've inherited. And I think that what's so beautiful about Black Voices is it feels like the Lord's almost inviting us to finish the dream. Not saying we're going to be the only people that does that. That's ridiculous. There's so many. It's a baton that the Lord is handing to a generation, saying, "Hey, take this and go." But I think I'd never really thought that the church would pick it up. I didn't realize that I didn't really fully believe that until everything happened 2020 all the way through until Black Voices being birthed. And I think what's been so sweet and so special about BV is seeing that there is an entire people, not just the Black people in CR, but circuit riders, all of us, fully owning the heart and the message and the mandate and the warfare and the dream of God that's behind this, and saying, no, we want to see Jesus receive his inheritance.
Yes.
Period. And so we're going for it. And I'm just wow, God's really doing it. And so I think that's been my highlight. And there's so many branches that come off of that.
Yeah.
Seeing my friends not code switching every day, but being fully able to be themselves, or seeing just all these different other aspects of the puzzle coming in has been so sweet. But the overarching umbrella is just, wow, God really is activating an entire people to carry the mandate and the mantle of being ministers of reconciliation. And it's a dream come true.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And it's been cool because two of our really good mutual friends, Joel Willis and Chaz, have been so encouraged by y'all and so impacted. And so I can see the fruit of what y'all are doing in our friends. And so like keep it up. But Josue, any last things I should say?
Yeah, no, thank you guys for, first of all, for what you guys are doing, accepting that call to, something that's given to all of us, but not everybody accepts it or does anything with it. So I think the Lord has given you guys, a grace to be able to do something, and then you're making it happen, I'm always reminded of in Colossians chapter 1, towards the end of it, after Paul talks about, Christ in us, the hope of glory, he says, therefore, warning every man and teaching every man that we may present every man perfect in Christ Jesus.
Yeah. Wow.
I strive with the working of the Spirit which works in me mightily, right? And I see that's what you guys are doing, right? Working with the power of God within us in such a powerful way to bring about change and transformation and partner with the Lord in that. So, I mean, for me, I'm encouraged, even just hearing the stories and hearing all the testimonies that have come from that. So thank you guys for even taking the time to sit with us and share all those things.
Totally.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess y'all gotta go, but real quick, any last things?
I think that's good. I mean, love you guys. Thanks for providing this opportunity. I guess lastly, for those who want to know more about Black Voices, you can go to blackvoicesmovement.com if you want to stay updated on what we're doing, our training schools, our gatherings. And yes, I mean, everyone, follow us on Instagram at Black Voices Movement. And it's just everyone has a part to play in this. Yeah. And we're all on the same team. And use your diversity to actually reach the people that look like you and that don't look like you. Use the authority that the Lord's given you. And so that's kind of my commissioning speech is that, I mean, we never neglect the power of a weak yes. Because I thought I was disqualified from being a part of something like this, and God had other things to say about it. So
Come on.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's good. Danny with the one-liners.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Take notes, guys.
Yeah, for real.
yeah.
But yeah, y'all, that'll be a wrap for us today. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. We'll be linking all of Stephanie and Danny's information and Black Voices information in the description below. If y'all want to go support them, check them out. All of our information will be in the description below as well if you want to support us. And so thank y'all again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And until next time, much love. God bless.
God bless.
Thank y'all.
Awesome.